Welcome to Truths, the podcast where love for Torah, Israel, the Jewish people, and God meets fearless critical inquiry. Through powerful conversations and thought-provoking solo teachings, we explore how timeless Jewish wisdom can ignite 21st century meaning, drive personal transformation, deepen our connection to God and to one another, and inspire bold action to heal our world. Here's your host, Rabbi Dr. Levi Brackman.
Welcome to Truths, Jewish Wisdom for Today. Thank you so much for joining. I'm your host, Levi Brackman. Before I begin, if you like this podcast, please like it, subscribe, leave a review wherever you listen to the podcast. That helps other people also find it. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now, I'm really excited about today's episode. It is a conversation that I had with Rabbi Manis Friedman. Rabbi Manis Friedman doesn't really need much of an introduction to people who watch videos with regard to Judaism on the internet. He seems to always pop up on people's feeds. He was, many years ago, a simultaneous translator of the Lubavitch Rebbe's talks. He also was very well known for traveling the world, talking and expounding upon Jewish wisdom and Chassidic teachings. And till this day, he's still a very sought-after speaker. And in addition to that, he's also a person who has garnered quite a bit of his own controversy. And one of the most recent controversies that he's had is with regard to this idea that God needs humans, God needs the mitzvahs. And that is how I got into this conversation with Rabbi Manis Friedman, because Yoni Katz, who is his nephew and is also a friend of mine, we go back probably 30 years at this point, ended up having a conversation over the course of many months about this. And eventually we just set up this conversation with Rabbi Friedman. I also did my own solo episode on whether God needs or God doesn't need. I refer you back to that conversation. Now, this conversation, my goal was to try and understand fully what Rabbi Manis Friedman was trying to say, and whether, in fact, it was somewhat of a departure from traditional Jewish teachings. You can judge for yourself, but after listening to him and having that conversation, my sense is that it's not really a departure at all. He's just repackaging, and maybe he likes to say things perhaps in more of a pejorative way. He likes to say that Orthodox Jews don't really have a God. And as he says that, I think that is a little bit unfair, but he does like to say things in a way in which make you sit up and think. But when you really probe what he's saying, as I try and show, he's really saying the same thing that the Kabbalists have said. He's not saying anything different. I do, at the end of the conversation, challenge him to think of God a little bit differently than he's even thinking about God currently. Now, instead of thinking about God just as being the giver of the Torah and of the mitzvahs, but thinking of God in a broader sense than even that. And you can judge in the conversation whether I succeeded in getting that point across or not. I definitely wanted to have in the conversation some deference to Rabbi Friedman. I hope I succeeded at that, given the fact that he's a lot older than me and has been doing this for a very long time, and that he was a guest on my podcast. And I'm very grateful that he came on the podcast to have this full conversation. So I definitely wanted to offer him that deference. I'm very grateful that he had this conversation with me. I'm hoping that you, my viewer, listener, also enjoy it as much as I did. I really, really enjoyed this conversation with Rabbi Friedman, and perhaps there will be a part 2 in the future. Let's wait and see. Anyway, without further ado, here I present to you my conversation with Rabbi Manis Friedman about whether God needs us, God doesn't need us, and what is the definition of God anyway. Welcome to Truths, Jewish Wisdom for Today. I think you are probably one of, at least out there on the internet, one of the biggest purveyors of Jewish wisdom. So it's really fitting to have you on my podcast called Truths, Jewish Wisdom for Today. So I'm really grateful for you being here. As a background, the reason, I guess, why we're sitting here today is somehow it came up in my feed on YouTube. A lot of these videos about God needs and God doesn't need. And Yoni and I have a mutual, very good friend, Adam Haston. And I was talking to him in shul. I was thinking, what is this? And he said, why don't you talk to Yoni? So Yoni and I had a conversation, ended up doing a solo episode of my podcast about it. And here we are, we're talking about it. Now, since that solo episode, I've especially the last few days. I knew I was going to talk to you. I went through everything you've spoken about this on YouTube that I could get my hands on. And I've thought very deeply about it. But I think before I jump into that, Yoni, you wanted to say something in the introduction as well.
Yeah, thank you, Levi. I know you're a busy man, so for making this happen. So yeah, basically, Levi and I have really been going back and forth about this idea that God, in His essence, absolutely needs us and needs our mitzvahs. And we've been quoting sources back and forth, trying to convince each other of each other's stance. And I thought it would be best just to have a conversation with the rabbi, and obviously everyone could sort of give their stance and try to better understand perhaps the other opinion. But let's get right into it. Does God need us? Does He need our mitzvahs, or is that heresy? Can we talk about God in His essence, or we can only talk about after the Tzimtzum, after He contracts Himself? Levi, take it from there.
I just want to say that I find it incredibly distasteful that people are heresy hunting. It's probably one of the most distasteful things that I see. It's in-group and out-group. I think that word is not necessary to be bounded about at all. Yeah, but I think that I may have come to a different understanding recently. So if I may, by the way, I just also wanted to mention that in Lubavitch, I was brought up in Lubavitch, obviously, and we called our mashpim Reb. We didn't call them rabbi. I remember going to Reb Wolf and saying to Reb Wolf, Rabbi Greenglass, and he got very upset with me. He says, I'm Reb Wolf. So I don't know whether you particularly like being called Rabbi Friedman, or you prefer that I refer to you as Rabbi Manis.
Somehow Rabbi Friedman is less formal. Because, there are rabbis a dime a dozen.
The Reb, it's like Mr. is a surgeon in England. If you're a Mr., you're a very big doctor. So in Lubavitch, if you're Rebbe Oil or Reb Mendel, I wanted to give you the respect due. That's why I ask.
Yeah.
So can I just present my understanding of what I've heard from you, because I really listened in great depth. And I want to separate it into two parts, the need part and the Atzmus part, because I think that they need their own treatment. So from what I understood you saying need, is you kept saying that need does not imply a lack. The need that you're saying about HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not imply a lack. And then you use another pasuk, the verse of Ish Levad. It's not good for a person to be alone. And you say that that is also what God had this sense, that it's not good for him to be alone.
Yeah.
Now, that idea of humans, at least, not wanting to be alone comes from the idea of a taiva. It's very, very closely related to this idea of the desire to be a man, to be with a woman. He wanted a woman. So, and which is very closely related to this idea of that God desired to have. He wanted, he desired. And if a taiva is passionate, right? You can't ask. So this is like a quintessential desire. It sounds like to me you're equating the need with the taiva, and maybe the need is a pirush on the taiva. It's that you're expounding on the idea of desire by using the word need, with the caveats that it's not the same need as one which has a lack. Am I to understand that correctly?
Good.
Yeah, okay. So in that case, then the word need is a little bit of a misnomer, right? It's a pirush with a caveat, and it's the same thing as desire. And therefore, there's nothing controversial here, nothing to see here, from what it seems to me, is the first part of it.
Yeah, the question is it optional?
Oh, okay. Is it quintessential? So that's the next thing, getting into the Atzmus part of it. So what I think about when I've thought about the Atzmus part of it, I think there's like another part which is not well known, which maybe people, my audience know it, or maybe they don't. But actually, in the Talmidei Hari, there were different, like Yisrael Saruk, for example, in Sheva Yosef, talks about this idea of the Tzimtzum Lifnei Tzimtzum Rishon, calls it Tzimtzum Da'avi Akadmei. And this whole thing is based on the beginning of the Zohar in Parshas Bereishis. Bereish Hamnusa Demalka, Galif Gilufay Betira Ilah. In the beginning of the desire of the king, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in other words, of God, he etched an etching in Tira Ilah. I guess the supernal purity or something like that. They go and they talk about what is Tirei Olam, what's Galit Gilufay, and they talk about this Tzimtzum, which happened at Tzimtzum Rishon. So it's called Tzimtzum Avi Kadmon. Before that, there wasn't Oir, there was only Atzmus. And then you have this thing called Atzmus Oir in Sof. And after that, you had the Makom Machalal, what's called the Tzimtzum Rishon, the Great Contraction. That Rabbi Chaim Bitul in the Eitz Chaim only talks about from Adam Kadmon and below, and he only starts off with the Tzimtzum Rishon. He leaves out this entire thing of this first Tzimtzum. So it seems to me that this idea which you're saying, that this thing happened within Atzmus, you're talking about in Tirei Olam. You're really saying Golef Gilufay b'Tirei Olam. And therefore it's a Tzimtzum Rishon, and it happened within the essence of the divine. But it didn't happen within. There is also, like, he mentions there in Sheva Yosef, he says that Moshe Rabbeinu, there was a level which Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't understand. In other words, there's this singularity there, which is, as the Gemara says, in other words, there's something which is beyond us, and don't be doidish there. But you mentioned, because I listened very carefully to what you said, you mentioned that the first thing we know about God, right? That's not the first thing that exists about God, correct? It's the first thing we know about, what God allowed us to know about him, which is Bereshim Lusa de Malka, Golef Gilufe b'Tirei Olam. And that's what we know. Anything else we don't know, because God didn't reveal himself to us. So in the essence that he allowed himself to know about us, is Bereshim Lusa de Malka, and that is that quintessential thing, whatever it was, which doesn't imply a lack in the divine. And that is quintessential, it's in his essence. I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, that's also somewhat of what you're saying with a little bit of Kabbalistic flair around it. Or am I misunderstanding something?
So what is it you're saying? That it is essential, but it's not from his essence?
No, I'm not. I'm just telling you what the Kabbalists say. I don't understand any of this. I'm like ChatGPT. ChatGPT can explain you something, it doesn't understand anything about it. I don't understand anything about Atzmus. I don't claim to. I said that in my own solo kind of thing. I don't understand anything about this. To make as if I understand what any of this means, I'm clueless. I just tried to listen carefully to what you were saying and try to intuit what you were saying and to see if this is actually also what the Kabbalah are saying, or is it a departure? And the way I'm understanding it, if the way I'm understanding it correctly, it doesn't sound like it's a departure. It sounds like this is just another way of saying it, maybe in a more evocative way. You're using words which grabs people's attention, but you're really saying, that happened, that's what caused the Tzimtzum Avi Kadmon, that happened in Atzmus, and as a matter of fact, it's Atzmus Oir in Sof, it's called Atzmus Oir in Sof, the Mitzvot Rebbe calls it Atzmus Oir in Sof, I saw it in Eter Atzmus Oir in Sof. They use these words. They don't talk about specifically the Tzimtzum Avi Kadmon. It's not found, as far as I know, in Lubavitch Chabad. It's found in Ran Strashela, but it's not found in Lubavitch Chabad from the Mitzvot Rebbe onwards. I don't think it's found. I haven't learned all Alter Rebbe, of course not. But I just, from what I've learned, but it seems to me that you're just using different words than the Mukabalim, but you're not saying something. You're not saying that there isn't a singularity which is beyond us and we can't say anything about.
First of all, it is in Chabad. The Alter Rebbe said that the Arizal's Tzimtzum Rishon is not really the Rishon.
No, I said it is in Chabad. I did. I said I don't know if it's not in Alter Rebbe at all. I just haven't seen it beyond Alter Rebbe and beyond. That's what I said. Yeah.
All right. Let's just make it very, very simple. Without using the word Atzmus, let's use the word He. Does he want this world to exist? If he didn't want it, it wouldn't be. If he does want it, he wants it, then it's essential. If it's essential, huh?
Yeah, I don't think anyone, that's what I'm saying. That's quite standard Kabbalistic fare.
No, it's not.
It's not?
It's not.
What does Bereshim Nusa de Malka Golef Gilufa b'Tirei Olam mean then?
That's already the beginning of the process.
No, because he says that it's an Atzmus Oir in Sof. That when the Rebbe says that's in Golef Gilufa in Shar Yichud, he says that's in Atzmus Oir in Sof. It's in us. Actually, he says the word that's in Atzmus. In other words, attached up. Galif Gilufay B'Tidei Ilah isn't Atzmus.
But in the Kabbalah, it was never understood that's him. Atzmus Ein Seif was never translated as him.
It's as him as it relates to other.
So it's not really him.
Okay, so this is what I want to get to. So are you denying the concept of the cosmism? So this is really important. So I may have misunderstood you, because are you denying a cosmism or panentheism of Chassidus?
I don't know if I would call it that.
No, in other words, because what happens if you say that there is a place, there's no place within the divine. In other words, there's no singularity which is beyond this. If you say that, then what you're in essence saying is that das elyon is not pure das elyon. In other words, there can't be any pure das elyon. So a cosmism is this idea, or panentheism is this idea that actually what we see, this conversation that we're having, is really an illusion. From the vantage point of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, none of it's here. From the truest vantage point, none of it's here. And that's the kind of immanence, the divine immanence, which is really powerful for a lot of people. And you take away that divine immanence. So the panentheism of the Das Elyon, when you get to that level of Das Elyon, of recognizing, by making God tangible, right, by saying he needs you, what you divorce away a little bit is that panentheism, or you at least take some of the pure aspect of the panentheism, in other words, the acosmism, which is found in Chassidus Chabad, and you dilute it a little bit, which makes God's immanence a little bit less immanent.
How do you figure? It makes him everything much more immanent, and the world much more necessary.
It makes, that's the point. Yeah, exactly your point. It makes it more necessary, which makes the other more of an other, correct? So it makes my existence and the existence of the universe more of an existence. And when you have that, even in the eyes of Das Elyon, so when you have that and you close your eyes and you say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and you imagine that it's all Echad, the total unity, and the fact that, to use the example of the sea, right? The wave in the sea, there's no separation between the wave and the sea, really. Maybe when you look at it, it seems like a wave, but it's not really a wave. It's just sea, right? And that's just a marshal to how much the insignificance of us is compared to the immanence of the divine. That divine immanence of Das Elyon is really, and when you get in that headspace, it's unbelievably powerful. You feel the divine everywhere, to the degree that your own existence completely subsumed in it entirely and utterly. So that's the idea of ultimate Bitul. But when you make the yesh a little bit more yesh, then you actually remove the ability to get subsumed in the one in that kind of way.
Yeah, you're right. And that's exactly right.
Yeah.
The fact that the Eibishter had a taiva for Olam Hazeh makes Olam Hazeh much more real than if it were real.
Yeah. No, it does. So what it does, the flip side of it is that it removes the ultimate sense of immanence that you can have when you meditate.
It's not a contradiction. The less significant the world is as a world, the more significant it is as a taiva. Bitul,
No, right, but you're still giving ultimate purpose, ultimate significance to the yesh v'dav gashmi. Ultimate significance.
ultimate meaning, it's just him. In other words, if it's just him, it's less of a world, but a more significant world. Like, it seems like a contradiction, right?
That seems like a contradiction to me, yeah.
Yeah. It's a non-existent world that is absolutely essential.
Yeah, I can't get my head around what that means.
It means that without...
it either has ultimate significance or it has ultimate insignificance. And to say that to say that it has ultimate significance and insignificance at the same time, I mean, that could be maybe what you're saying is, I mean, that might be fine to say that because it really means that it has no significance.
The world would be much more real if it didn't need to be created. If you're real, create yourself. If your existence is self-justified, then why do you need to be created? The fact that it needs to be created means it has no reality independently.
I don't understand that. Sorry.
If you don't exist unless I make you exist, then you still don't exist. Only I exist because I made you.
All right, this is okay. All right.
So if you can't exist without my making you, then your existence is a borrowed one. It's not your existence. Like the body gets life from the neshama. So is the body alive? Not really. Because the life that it has is not its life.
I mean, on the meter scale, as we call it, it all seems like, but as soon as you get beyond the meter scale, everything changes anyway, right? So in other words, like, it seems to me like that which we call real reality is only very, very subjective within the meter scale that we live in. Once you get to the cosmic or to the quantum regime, you're in completely different territory. So I'm not sure what you mean by real anyway.
Oh, okay. So let's just talk in the Chassidic context.
Yeah.
Bitul elyon. The world is not real.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it is all created by one word, which is totally insignificant. And without that one word, it can't exist at all. So even while it exists, it's really being existed.
Yeah, that's a das tachton perspective.
Fine.
Yeah.
So by that account, the world is nothing.
It's not as nothing as compared to, in other words, it still has some kind of independent existence from the das tachton perspective, right? It's just totally a contingent existence. In other words, it's an existence, but it's an existence which is totally contingent. And the argument that Chassidus makes is, therefore, if you think about it deeply, it's not really existence, but it's still, the Bitul isn't total and utter.
So, but what is the Bitul? The Bitul is, if you can't exist without something outside of you, then even when you do exist, you can't take credit for it.
Yeah, that's that level of Bitul, yeah.
Now, when we say, but God desires this world, so we can understand that in two ways. God desires the world, and obviously it does have value. And that, Chassidus says, is not true. God desires the world, and it has absolutely no value.
Right.
But the fact that he desires it makes it absolutely essential.
Right.
So the more he desires it, the less it exists, but the more significant it becomes.
You articulated the paradox, I think.
If it's a paradox. I'm not even sure it's a paradox. It doesn't exist by itself, so its entire existence is the taiva.
No, in other words, what you're assigning the importance that God assigns to it, right? Which is because he wanted it, desired it, needs it, whatever word you want to use, right? That is what makes it real. But also, at the same time, it's not real at all. And the way, my understanding of the way Chassidus explains that is the classic das elyon tas tachton perspective. Legabe us, it's real. Legabe Kadosh Baruch Hu, from the way God sees it from his vantage point, it's totally non-existent.
Our perception.
And that's the paradox which we have. And so, I mean, that doesn't sound, but you're still not saying that there isn't a singularity in the divine which is beyond all of that. Or are you saying
that? Here's, I think, where people get really stuck and confused. Yeah? The universe Maisa Bereshis is not rooted in Atzmus. Torah and Yidden are rooted in Atzmus. Because that which is rooted in Atzmus always was. It doesn't need creating. If something needs creating, it's obviously not Atzmus. So all the arguments I get from Lubavitchers is, it says everywhere that Eibusha doesn't need this world. I'm not talking about this world. I'm talking about Torah, mitzvahs, and Yidden.
Yeah, but all of that, I've heard you say that. And what I find interesting is, it's just another way of saying Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. In other words, it's another way of saying that it's all subsumed in the one. In other words, yeah. In other words, it's not like when I hear, right, I say, I don't hear, therefore it's quintessential this. What I hear is the echad more than I hear. In other words, don't think that these are separate. There's no trinity here. It's all one, just like everything else is one.
So if it's one, then it's not optional?
This is the paradox, which I think you're pointing out. The paradox is the das elyon das tachton paradox, which is, I think, what which it sounds like you're articulating.
Is it a paradox?
Yeah, because everything within the because it's all hononym, right? In other words, when you talk about God, you're talking about the hononym. So when I say God desires, of course there's no desire in God. We don't know what we're talking about. We don't know what we're talking about. We're saying words about a being which is so much other than could ever be in our own experience, that we're using words like shaver in order that humans can understand it in some kind of way, but obviously we don't know what we're talking about, right? Because it's talking about something which is so much other than our experience. And
that's what I'm fighting against.
You're fighting against what? That God's so much other than us?
Yeah, that whatever we say about him, we don't really understand. Well, then we're not having a conversation at all.
That's exactly right. And that's what's interesting is but that's what brings you to the immanence, right? In other words, if you take that away, and by the way, to be clear, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. And this isn't about what's right or wrong. And I'm just trying to have a conversation around it, because my own personal experience when I meditate, the most powerful experience of immanence comes about when I'm able to get a glimpse of this level of self-abnegation. And so it seems to me that by saying that God is so much other beyond their own experience, and that allows a person to have a true transcendent experience, right? Where they feel the immanence of the divine. That's what allows it. That's what gives the opening. And if you learn Chassidus, that the whole idea of getting to Bitul, the conscious spice, I called this season of my podcast, I called it Seeking Ecstasy, after the word hispailos. Because, so if you learn conscious hispailos, the ultimate of what you're trying to get to is that total utter Bitul sense of total self-abnegation, where that sense of transcendence is complete. And it removes what you're doing, actually turns that on its head in a way. You might be right. In other words, I don't know, like from a theological perspective, I don't know what goes on in the divine. In other words, you might have a closer conversation with Atzmus than I do. I have no idea. I'm just saying that what it does is it takes away that ability to have that transcendent experience where you are able to feel totally subsumed in the divine.
You're being totally subsumed in the unknowable.
Yes, because everything which you experience is the knowable, and you understand when you go through that experience, you get it. I don't understand is the wrong word, because it's really it transcends understanding, right? It gets to that level which transcends understanding. It's more of a sense that everything you know is totally insignificant compared to this other being, which is that's a transcendent experience, right?
Yeah, but that is not Chabad.
Perhaps not. I must have misunderstood Chabad then. I've learned quite a bit of it.
Chabad is saying you don't dissolve into the unknowable. You dissolve into the reality of him, not the mystery of him.
What's the difference?
Oh.
Because there is this idea of memufal and chabal tidrish, which Chassidus talks about a lot.
No, it doesn't. That's part of the criticism that Chabad doesn't follow that rule.
I don't know. Which Chabad? I don't know which Chabad you're talking about because there's a lot of Rebbeim.
Who say b'mufla mucha al tidrish? No.
It's Gemara in Chakiga.
Yes.
And that's the idea of Atik, right? Primus Atik, Yosenis Atik, etc.
And
Chabad
Chabad
idea
says,
of its mufla.
Yes. And Chabad says that there's nothing you don't understand. Just ask and you'll get to know.
I missed that share.
Oh, okay. So here's the difference. Do you become bottled to what you don't know, or do you become bottled to what you do know? What's a deeper Bitul?
I don't think
that was a rhetorical question.
One to get to the other.
Huh?
You have to go through one to get to the other, right? It's
Probably.
through Chachma that you transcend Chachma.
Probably. But the point is this. Bitul doesn't mean I'm incapable.
No, it doesn't. Absolutely not.
That's not Bitul, that's just a fact. It's not an avodah to get to that level.
Some people need that avodah to get there.
Right. Bitul means he is so much more real that I disappear.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. That's
not,
right. Yeah,
not I can't understand, I'm limited,
No.
He is so real, forget about me.
That's true. That's right. Okay, I like that.
So how does he get to be so real? Because we
forgetting
can't understand him?
No, it's that. Of course you can't understand it, but that's not. It's not like, oh, well, who owes me? Because you're still feeling the yesh. If you're saying woe owes me while you're experiencing that, you're not going to experience it. So in other words, or it's the lack of experiencing of it, which is where you get to. So
Yeah,
in other words,
in general, Bitul doesn't mean I'm nothing. Bitul means you're everything.
Absolutely.
Okay. So here, the only thing, I think this is actually true. The only thing we don't know about God is why he had the taiva. Other than that, we know everything. The only mystery is why did he have the taiva?
Really? I mean, you know everything else about God?
Yeah.
I couldn't say that.
And why don't we know why?
No, but what does that mean? I want to double click on this. What do you mean you know everything else about God? What does that mean? What does that mean?
Whatever there is to know about him, we know.
Oh, that's different. You said you know everything about God.
Yeah.
You mean whatever there is to know from a human perspective?
Whatever there is to know.
But
what about those parts that are not knowable? Well, what about it? What do you want to say about it? We don't know.
Whatever's knowable, whatever God has allowed himself to be knowable. This is where I think we're invited. This is Bereshit Nus the Malka. What God has allowed us to know about him, and the things he said, I haven't allowed you to know about him. And one of those things that he hasn't allowed us to know about him is what you're saying is why he desired.
Right.
Okay.
And why is that?
I have no idea.
Neither does he.
Okay. So if I type concussion it.
What does that mean?
In other words, it could either mean one of two things. It could either mean that he's not revealing that to us, or it could mean that it's something which there's no point asking a question because there's not going to be an intelligible answer. Because
when you say why, you're saying for what purpose? And the Eibishter says, no, that is my purpose. You say, yeah, but for what purpose? You're running around in circles.
Right, correct.
The purpose doesn't have a purpose.
It's not an intelligible purpose, right? In other words, there's a difference.
No,
right?
no. If this is where the buck stops, then there's no further questions.
Because there's a difference between saying that something doesn't have an intelligible purpose and saying something doesn't have any purpose whatsoever, right?
The purpose doesn't have a purpose. It's the purpose. It's it.
Yeah.
Like if you say, what is the purpose of life? And I tell you what the purpose of life is, and you say, what for? I say, I just told you what for.
So it's so interesting because the way I know in Chabad they make a very big deal. All the Chabad Chassidus makes a very big deal
About
There's one medrash, but there are lots of other reasons given for why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world as well, which could be used to try and to augment our understanding of the Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the desire. One could make that argument as well, but I don't think it's. I more want to understand what you're saying than make that a counter argument.
Yeah. All I'm saying is the ultimate purpose doesn't have a purpose because it is the purpose. Purpose doesn't need a purpose.
Right, which is the idea of Lo tov v'yosish levad, is this idea which comes from the Taiva, which is what you're saying.
So anything non-essential needs a purpose.
But just to go back to what we're saying here is what you're not saying, because all of this does not preclude, all of this sounds, pretty much very similar to me, to my ears, to Bereisha Musa de Malka. In other words, it sounds very similar to that concept. All you're saying is that which is beyond that, which may or may not be beyond that, but hasn't been revealed to us. We just don't know anything about it. And therefore, what's the point of talking about it? And that is the same idea to me. I'm going to translate into my words. That's the concept of don't go there.
Not don't go there. You can't go. There's nothing there.
There's exactly same thing. So in other words, what I'm getting to is that ultimately you're not denying. You're just saying that we can't say anything about that, which is the same thing all the Mukabbalim say about that.
No. So let me ask a practical question. Is there any part of God that does not want you to put on tefillin?
Oh, that's a completely different question. The mitzvahs, that will never, because I don't know if you're Pasha Shmini, in Likkutei Torah Pasha Shmini, where he talks about, it's like, if anything is close to heresy, it's this one shtick in Likkutei Torah and Pasha Shmini, where he talks about two different types of tzaddikim. Talks about the Shir Habar and the Leviasim. It talks about when the Rashbi was in the Ma'ara, he obviously didn't have the ability to put on tefillin or to do matzah or to eat matzah, etc. So he talks about this tzaddik, which actually doesn't he's able to achieve mitzvahs through being yachid yichudim. And that's a tzaddik which comes from higher than Torah, higher than Chachman, higher than Torah. So his neshama comes from higher than Torah, and therefore he's in a sense not bound in the same way. That's a whole different conversation about the need for the mitzvahs rather than the need for creation, because I think there's lots of things.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. So was there a level, a place in Hashem where there is no Torah?
It depends where you look. There are some indications that there is, and some indications that there isn't. Depends where you look, from what I can tell.
What's the bottom line?
I don't know. I can just tell you what the books say. I don't really have an opinion on those things.
No, so most people say, whatever we know, whatever the Torah says, whatever Chassidus says, that's all fine and good. But the Eibishter himself is way beyond all of this. No, he's not.
Well, we don't know if he's not, because whatever way he's beyond, we don't know. So it's like, as you point out, this is the same thing Kabbalim say. We don't talk about it because we don't know what we're talking about. It's just not even worth talking about, because which is, I think, ultimately what you're saying. The highest level that we can talk about, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the world and wants the mitzvahs. Anything beyond that is not something we can talk about at all.
We don't even know if it exists.
Because it doesn't exist in the same way we know of existence. Because it wasn't revealed to us.
Who says that there's more to Hashem than mitzvahs? Who says?
So
we like to think. We're dreaming. Oh, but there must be more. You don't know that there's more.
I'll tell you why people feel that it has to be more. And I think that saying there isn't, as in there isn't at all, has a little bit of a challenge to it. Because when people meditate, they have this, it's not an intellectual thing. It's not like something which you can explain from I can tell you where it is and explain you how it is and where it comes from. It's more of a deep intuition that somehow is revealed, or somehow revealed is the wrong word, because it has this arises of this sense of something which is so, which you're enveloped in so totally and utterly, that it's so otherness and it's so beyond, and that it's ineffable, unexplainable, etc. So people have a sense of that, and and I think that is the transcendent experience, as I'm going back to, which I think people then equate to Yichidish B'Nefesh, or whatever you want to call that, is beyond everything. Just to give it the Chassidic term, I'll call it Yichidish B'Nefesh, but I don't know if that's what it's really referring to. But I think that's why people want to say that the beyond. It's more of an intuitive thing that a mystic might feel or sense, rather than something which you can point to what it might say in a particular sefer.
It seems like that kind of experience takes you further away from Hashem rather than closer to Him. That is not yichud. Sounds a little self-indulgent.
No, the opposite.
Wait, I just want to. Why does it sound self-indulgent?
Yeah, why? Yeah, why would it self? Yeah, it's a good question. Why? Why do you think it's self-indulgent?
It feels good.
So, yeah, if you learn the Mitzvot Rebbe and Kunstler Spilos, and if you learn, Rabbi Manis Friedman, who both talk about this because this was their thing, the second it feels good is when it's over.
Why?
Because the second you're feeling anything in that moment, what you're feeling is self, not other. In other words, you can't actually be feeling anything when that's happening. You actually experience total loss of self, sense of self.
Which feels good.
No, it doesn't feel anything.
Why do you want it?
That's why I say it's ineffable.
Why do you want it?
According to the mystics, the Kabbalah Chassidus talks about it. The reason why it's wanted is because your neshama, there's this kind of desire to leave your body when the neshama has just quintessentially this desire to constantly go above. So in other words, there's something about the neshama. The truth is the Nefesh Bahamis doesn't want it, according to Filon Chassidus, doesn't want it at all. And most people don't even know that it exists. When you're able to clear away the yeshus, that's when that kol sanafshi starts to happen.
Kol sanafshi to someone, not to nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, this kind of bitul sounds like Buddhism.
It's very interesting that you say that, because I don't know a tremendous amount about Buddhism. Maybe you know a lot more than I do. But I do think that the key insight of all the mystics, not just the Jewish mystics, right, was that Gashmias gets you nowhere, ultimately, and that it's an illusion. The fact that you think it gets you somewhere. In other words, the more you indulge in what your Nefesh Bahamis, to use that term, wants you to indulge in, the less it gets you anywhere. So that's the key insight. So to that degree where there's overlap in the Venn diagram, there is probably overlap.
So the Gashmias doesn't get you anywhere, and the alternative is?
Are you asking me to define the opposite of Gashmias?
No, to the Buddhist.
I don't know. I can't talk for Buddhism. I'm not a Buddhist.
Okay, so the Buddhist experiences great humility and Bitul.
They do?
Yeah. That's their whole title. The whole idea is that you are insignificant, you are nothing, you're right. You're insignificant compared to the whole. What is that? To say I am nothing is not real Bitul. Real Bitul is feeling the emes Hashem, which makes your emes laughable.
So what's the emes Hashem then?
How real he is. His
Which is
ratzon,
what?
his plan, his taiva.
So it's a physical manifestation of the divine, is what you're talking about then?
Why physical? It's him.
So is this a form of pantheism then, is what you're talking about?
What's the connection?
Because then the physical is also God then?
The physical serves God.
Okay, so what is the physical then? Is it God? Or is it's not God?
No.
Okay.
It's not God like the neshama is a chelik elokah mimao. Obviously, right? So
which
it's
way
God's
is God?
creation, it's God's tool, it's God's project. It's not him,
Okay.
but the neshama is.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Torah is.
You mean the physical words of the Torah are God? What are you saying?
Yes. That's an essential part of him.
So my chumash, when I open up and the ink is God?
No.
So I'm trying to understand it because I'm something I'm missing here in the differences, the distinction you're making between what you're saying and what I'm saying. I'm missing the distinction.
The ratzon for a mitzvah is him. It didn't happen. He didn't create it. He didn't make it up. He didn't buy it anywhere. This is him. And the neshama, that's him.
Okay, but
So let's get back to the question.
why is it not Bitul? So why is
does
that not Bitul? So what is Bitul? Bitul is Kabbalah Sayom Shemayim, is what you're saying. Or am I understand that correctly?
Bitul is, he is real. And that overwhelms you. His reality,
different than
not his
Buddhism?
mystery.
How is that different than the Buddhism that you experience, where the person feels so overwhelmed by the existence of the one that they feel subsumed in it? How is that different?
What does it mean by the existence of the one?
The true existence of the divine, which
Oh,
is
the true
not them.
existence.
Yeah, they feel there's. See, it's what I find very. You're asking me to give words to somebody to something which is a unitive experience. Like anyone who's had the unitive experience is very hard. That's why it's called ineffable, right? It's very difficult to then put words to this unitive experience. So you generally, I don't talk about it, by the way.
The old story that it's much easier to dismiss myself than to accredit you. I can admit I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I can't admit that you're right. Why is that?
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of bittul where I
Yeah.
can say I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But the amount of bittul to recognize that you're right is way beyond that. It's a much greater bittul
Yeah.
to be impressed with your truth than to recognize my falsehood. The Buddhist, properly practiced, recognizes how false his own existence is. So what is a real existence? Nothing. That's easy. I'm nothing, I'm insignificant, that's it. That's it, okay. So, if you're not so real, who are you going to listen to? I don't listen to anybody. I'm nothing.
Mm.
In Torah, your bittul means you become bottled to him,
Yeah. Kabbalah Sayom Shemayim.
not by him. It's not his greatness humbles you. You become bottled to him,
Yeah.
to what he wants.
No, which is Kabbalah Sayom Shemayim. Is that
That's how it expresses itself.
correct?
But if you're going to become bottled to him, what is him?
Okay.
Unknowable.
Sorry, go ahead.
If he's unknowable, you can't be bottled to him.
I understand. I think I now understand what you're saying very clear. I think I understand. Thank you for clarifying that. I think I understand what you're saying. And my immediate thought about that is that I think that is classical, that is very classic Judaism. It's something which you would, if you went to any Litchfi yeshiva, this is the way you'd be told to serve God. But
where do you see this in the yeshivas?
This Kabbalah Sel Malchus Shemaim is you have to accept the heavenly yoke. Shvis Hashem Negdi Summit. It's the first thing which it says in Shulchan Aruch, and you understand that you're bottled to the will of the divine. And I think it sounds to me that is very. But when I learned Chassidus, especially the first two generations.
1 second. Let's talk about the yeshivas for another minute.
Okay.
El Malchus Shabayim, Kabbalah Soil, you have to do what it says.
Yeah.
Does he really care whether you put on the tefillin? No.
I don't. I think most people think that Hashem Kadosh Baruch Hu really does care.
No, they argue against that vehemently.
No, I think they're arguing against your framing of it. I think you are actually radically agreeing. You're framing it differently, but I think that you are actually what you're really doing is I thought you were doing something slightly different, but I think you're just espousing the mitzvahs have significance and are important. The way you serve God is by fulfilling the mitzvahs. I think is the way most Orthodox Jews would look at it, which is
most Orthodox Jews believe that the Eibishter doesn't need your mitzvahs at all. He only gave you.
He needs it either. What you believe, because you said that they don't believe that it needs. They don't believe it needs in the way humans need, which implies lack. We already concluded that you're not saying that. So in other words, that's just a pirush on the Sava Kodesh Baruch Hu B'Chateinim.
So let's put it one second. Let's put it a little differently. Ask any yeshiva bacher, when you do a mitzvah, does Hashem benefit from it? They'll tell you. It's apikursis to think that the Eibishter benefits from a mitzvah. It's only for your benefit. That's the official policy.
Yeah, but they haven't learned enough Kabbalah, because the first thing it says in these Frum that there's Shashurim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they probably haven't learned enough, because there are definitely there's Shashurim, especially.
So they're completely clueless of this.
Sorry?
They're completely clueless of the Kabbalah.
They might be. But
and even those who study
doesn't mean that's just because Amaratzis doesn't mean that's like what people who really understand things think.
No, that's their hashkafa. The hashkafa is all Torah and mitzvahs are a way for you to get schar. That's all it is. Yeah.
So that's that transactional nature of a very, very low level relationship with the divine.
So Kabbalah's oil means just shut up and do it, and you'll get rewarded for your stupidity.
On the very lowest level, yeah.
Your stupidity. You'll get rewarded for being stupid.
That's a pejorative way of saying it.
Yeah. So that's why they say I'm taking it too far.
But I think what you've touched upon, if I may, Rabbi Friedman, is that I was in Crown Heights because my son, I became a Zayda, and we had a Shalom Zacher, and there were a bunch of Bachrim there who were friends of my son, and I ended up talking with a couple of them, and they were telling me, they had lots of questions, and in the end, I said to them, okay, very good, you graduated middle school theologically, you're great, so now learn more. But I think that what you're touching upon is that in the Orthodox world, in the Frum world, or whatever you want to call it, no one graduates even elementary school theologically, and therefore they still have a very elementary view of this kind of transactional relationship with the divine, which they ought to
outgrow.
Yeah, they ought to graduate it. But what I'm saying is that.
But they've made it sacred. You're not allowed to question it.
Yeah, well, they ought to question.
Look, effectively, let's talk practical.
Yeah.
Effectively, the Frum world has no God. It only has laws.
Yeah, It's a very pejorative way of saying it. Yeah.
It's a religion without a God.
Whenever I hear this, because I interview so many people, and I always feel like I have to defend the Haredi world when I hear people say these things.
Yeah.
Because I have people from all the way from the left, but I always feel I have to defend because I've met so many people within this world who have such deep, unbelievably high relationships with God and very enlightened relationships with the divine, which way transcend what you're talking about. And I meet them regularly, and I interview them on my podcast, and that's what I searching out those people, and I find them. They're all over the place.
And when I describe them, I'm going too far. Not allowed to say that.
Because go back to the beginning of the conversation. I think the pirush of the words that you're using is what is evocative. When you say they have no God, I would put a finer point on that, and I would say that they have just a very transactional, sophomoric at best relationship with the divine. That's where I would put it, rather than saying they have no God.
Yeah, but the divine is like a non-entity. It's like a concept. There is no him.
But I might argue that you also, with all due respect, you also could graduate to the next level, if I may submit. Which is this unitive experience, which you seem to give pushback to, and which you say is nothingness, right? And therefore, it's not saying anything about it. So my pushback to you would be that there might be a level which is beyond. So you're identifying the very lowest sophomoric, juvenile level of the divine as being something which should be, for someone who's learned a lot and someone who's truly seeking, it should be an anathema to them. I agree. Although I wouldn't necessarily tell that everyone, because for some people that's very important for them to stay there, at least to have that in their life. But as you grow the levels, one of the things which really comes through learning the first two generations of Chabad is that it's all levels of Bitul, and there's Ein Sof levels of Bitul that you can get to. You never get there to the end where you felt it. There's always some yeshus, because we're Guf Gashmi, we're Neshama and Guf Gashmi. So the total transcendence is something, as you've pointed out, there's always going to be some yeshus there. Even when you have that most unbelievable transcendent experience, it's still going to be, you just can't get away from it. And on the other hand, you can keep going up that ladder. The more you're going to feel, the less the yeshus, the more the Bitul. What I would say is that there's always a level to graduate to higher.
I have to go, but let's leave it with this question. When the Alter Rebbe said, "I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your Elam Haba, I just want you," what does that mean? What does he want?
He doesn't want Giluyim, is what he means.
So what does he want? What does he want?
He wants to be totally subsumed.
By
he no longer exists. His Gashus, his Gashmis doesn't no longer exist.
He wants to be subsumed into what?
Yeah, but that's we don't know what that is Muflim Mimcha. But it's a but
1 second. He says, "Ich will nur dir." What does he mean? He means I don't know what I'm talking about?
No, what it means is that when it's that sense you have when the more you're subsumed. So the Giluyim of this idea that, wow, I feel great. I feel I had a really good davening today, or a really good meditative experience, that I felt the divine. I got excited. I jumped up and down. I felt, that's the Giluyim, right? Or whatever it is you felt. You went through the Heichalos and you saw Mashiach, whatever else. Those are the Giluyim. Chavonish the Giluyim. Tichalein is this idea of none of that. It's this total idea of total Bitul. Now, if you're able to explain what it is, you would be in a problem, right? Because now you're using physical terms of the material world to explain something which is so much other that you probably then haven't experienced Tichalein.
If that's not a paradox, I don't know what
it is. That's the point. But it's an intuition, right?
So listen, I really got to go.
Yeah.
The thing is like this: that Bitul that you're describing is a ruchniisdike experience. Ruchniis. It's not elokus.
I don't. Yeah.
That makes sense a little bit.
Not really.
The Bitul that is indescribable is a spiritual experience, not a godly experience. Because godly is unavailable, inaccessible. Ich will dir allein means I don't want to be spiritual.
Right, that's the Giluyim, but that's why I'm trying to be shayla, right? The spiritualization of it is what the Giluyim are. But ultimately, it's a unitive experience where there's nothing experienced at all.
No, that's Ruchnis. Ruchnis means the complete rejection of everything Gashmis.
We should learn Kunsh Spilas together.
But I think it hinges on this a lot. There are very powerful Ruchnisdik experiences, which is not him.
Yeah, 100%.
Elokus means him.
So that's the Giluyim, which we're talking about. The Ruchnisdik experiences.
So him is a definite article. It's not an unknowable. Because if it's unknowable, how do you know it's him? There is no him. It's mufla. So there is no him. I mean, it's exactly like a guy who says about his wife, can't understand women.
I don't think it's like that at all.
It's exactly like that. So who are you related to?
No.
If you can't understand women, you're not married to your wife.
Because you're not. Because we're talking about a something. One's a relationship with your wife. We can get into what it might be in a relationship with wife. It's not. It's more like something else which you might experience with your wife.
You should know God better than you know your wife.
No, I didn't say it's the same.
No, you should know God better than you know your wife.
Right, and that's it. But you go through the Viyadata to take you to the next one, right? The Viyadata takes you to the transcendent experience, right? So you can't get the Chochzes Chabadis, the Chachma Binan Das, through going through that experience of Chachma Binan Das. You can transcend that up into higher levels.
You know what the Rebbe Rashab said when somebody said to him, "Ilu yadaitiv hayisiv." He said, "So yadativ and hayisiv."
Okay, yeah.
It's not a negative.
No.
Get to know him and you'll be him.
Yeah, but there's the being him, which is the next level of beyond the das.
But being him is a tangible. It's not an unknowable. It's like saying, if you become him, nobody will understand you either.
I think we're talking past each other a little bit because it's very difficult to describe this particular thing that I'm saying. And
if you can't describe it, then you got to work on it.
No, because there are certain things which other people who... We should learn consciousness violence because that's what he's getting at. And in the end, that's what he's getting at. In that context, okay. I think. All right. It's been so wonderful. I've really, really enjoyed this. I'm really, really very, very grateful you spent time with me today. I know we had to reschedule, etc. I'm very grateful for your time.
To be continued.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Levi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, Yoni, for putting together.